Wow, where do I start? Okay, so professionally, I have been a teacher since 2004. And that's very much come to define me and my identity. So when we chatted before this interview about the fears that people have following redundancy or at stages of huge change or transition, I completely get that, because I think when you've been in a role for a while, it definitely comes to define who you are and your values. And so, yeah, I'm definitely would put myself in that camp of being defined by my role and my values, because teaching aligns very beautifully with my values of making a difference, making an impact, being there for other people. Unfortunately, personally, well, not unfortunately, but my personal situation is that I have twin boys, and one is severely autistic. And that means that he needs me intensively. And that doesn't mean that I always have the time and energy to commit to full-time teaching. So in 2014 now, I took a step back from full-time teaching. And now I just teach 2 days a week on a casual contract. And that has helped me to bring an income in, but it's also given me the space to explore what I want for me as Charlie. You know, not just as the carer for my son, not just as a teacher, but me as an individual.
May I ask, why did you transition from teaching to becoming a mindset coach, aside from being a full-time carer to your son?
Yeah.
Are there any other factors that are involved in that?
Do you know what? COVID itself has actually been a real turning point for me in my business. Prior to COVID, I was working with businesses around resilience, just sharing my own personal story. And I developed a 5-stage process to really challenge the limiting beliefs that we have, called the HEART model. So I was rolling that out in companies. I've worked corporate, I've worked with charities, quite a lot with charities, and a lot in schools, because that's my sort of comfort zone, if you like. That's my area of experience. But once COVID hit, my multi-academy trust, who employ me for the 2 days, reached out and said, you know, we'd really like you to do some one-to-one coaching with our staff who are struggling with the lockdown situation, with the change of routine, with homeschooling, with all the sort of upheaval that came back in March 2000. So I kind of say that I became an accidental coach. It's something that I absolutely love. I've done a lot of studying around since. And mindset management was very much born from the amalgamation of me wanting to reach hearts and minds and actually facilitate a really positive change in people.
Yeah, just to dig deeper here, Charlie, I saw a post of yours on LinkedIn there recently where you said, for the first time in your life, you felt you were doing something worthwhile and you didn't need other people's praise as such. You felt you were doing something worthwhile yourself, and it was coming from your heart. What encouraged you in the first place or what caused you in the first place to seek praise from other people as a younger professional person? What was the background to that issue for you?
I think, without lying on a couch and delving into my own personal history, I do think a lot of that comes from my own upbringing, and just that I was always the little girl that cheered everybody up. I was always the little girl that made everything right, and I was the ray of sunshine. And although that's beautiful, it creates an expectation. And so as I've grown up, the legacy of that has been that, you know, yes, I will live up to that, and I thrive in company and being able to cheer people up, listen to them and be a cheerleader for people. But it also means that I look externally for validation. I look outside of myself to check that I'm doing the right thing all of the time. And as I've grown older, that's become a little bit more of a burden for me, and a little bit of a challenge. And so, as you say, in the post that I shared on LinkedIn, it was very much around being proud of myself, and not needing that external validation quite as much. I'm not saying I'm cured. It's a process. You know, I'm almost 43. These things don't disappear just in the blink of an eye. But it's certainly something that I'm managing a lot better now than I have done in the past.
Thank you. Just moving forward, what services do you offer in your coaching business? Apart from, can you explain for the audience, what is mindset management?
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple of things that I offer. One is sort of widespread training. So we call it in-setting teaching, which is chatting to all of your staff in one go. And during that, I talk a lot around the change process and how it affects people. The Lancet review, which is a huge medical publication, recommended that individuals are aware of how change affects them on a, an emotional and a mental level, so that they can see themselves in that cycle and that process, and also so that they've got some self-help strategies to deal with that change. So I facilitate both of those in terms of explaining what change does to us on a whole host of different levels, and giving some strategies to help people cope with that. So once I've delivered the training, if people want to work with me one-to-one, they can do that. They can get in touch with me, and I offer private one-to-one coaching. And I also offer group coaching in organisations, sort of more so, where 4 people will come together. And actually that's beautiful, because there's real power in knowing that you're not on your own, and having that peer support system really facilitates change in a way that a one-off training doesn't always. So in my eyes, the one-off training is very much about awareness and covering the surface. And the one-to-one is very in-depth, breaking those limiting beliefs, breaking those barriers down, and putting in some meaningful change. And the group is sort of amalgamation of the both, really, so that people have that accountability and that safe space to discuss their issues and really have practical ways to move forward rather than just theory.
Your parents are twin boys yourself, and I presume you've been homeschooling. How has the homeschooling impacted your life? You're trying to run a business and you're homeschooling at the same time. How has that impacted you as a person?
Yeah, it's been really challenging, I have to say, because when the boys were at school, I had my space, they had theirs, and we could all very much get on with our own sort of thing. Whereas them being at home, the boundaries have merged significantly. And I think just having them in the house has made me feel that I need to check on them, that I should be there with them, I should be present with them, in a way that I don't need to when they're at school. So it puts pressure on me as a parent. And obviously then there are time constraints on my business. And I've just had to be realistic with myself and just manage my expectations of what I am actually capable of doing, and try not to burn out. In the past, I've been very guilty of trying to spin lots and lots of plates to try and keep lots and lots of people happy. And actually all that's happened is I've ended up burning out, and I've been useless to everybody. So I've definitely learned through my mistakes, and realize that I need to be clear with my boundaries with myself, not with other people. I think we talk a lot about boundaries with others, but I think we need to tap into what's right for us and to live by those as well.
So how do you manage to establish boundaries with your family members and your clients and your wider circle of friends and colleagues?
Sure. Okay. So with my family, there's a physical boundary sense in that I have my own office. So if they know I'm in the office, it's work time. If they do need to disturb me, they will come very sheepishly to the door and hover in case I'm doing something like this. And so they know this is the work zone, if you like. If there's something in particular that I need to get done, I will talk to them and I'll just say, I need to be 2 hours, don't disturb me. And after that 2 hours, we're going to sit and we're going to chill. We'll watch anime. My son's into anime, so we'll watch something, or we'll have lunch. And so I'm very clear on what when I can't be disturbed, and also the reward for the children of not disturbing me, and equally for my partner. I think partners can find it really difficult when you work from home not to feel overlooked and to feel sort of second best. And so I'm mindful that internet and my social media goes off at 8 o'clock, and I dedicate my time to my partner. With regard to clients, that's a really interesting one, because I do make myself very available to my clients. Accountability for my VIP clients, accountability is a huge part of the relationship and their progress. But I am clear that I'm at the end of the phone Monday to Friday, between in working hours up until 8 p.m. And then after that, I will respond sort of back in working hours. And it's really hard not to want to jump in and save people or be there to kind of answer their questions. But actually that just facilitates a need for them to rely on me, and I don't want that. I want them to be self-sufficient. So, the boundaries are there for my benefit, but they're also there for other people's as well.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned about burnout. Burnout is quite a significant issue in many industries, not just for self-employed people, but also for senior management and middle management. What do you do in your life to prevent burnout happening to you?
Okay. I think senior and middle management is a really interesting point when it comes to burnout, just to sort of deviate from your question, just because, who do they have to actually offload to? If you're a senior manager, you've got people accountable to, you can't moan down because they need to look up to you. If you're middle management, you can't moan up because they're the bosses, and you don't want to, suggest that you're not capable. But I think for me personally, it's really important to recognize that as much as I am, a businesswoman, a teacher, a mom, a charity founder, I'm a blogger, I'm a professional speaker, I'm also human. And it's really important to tap into that humanity and just think, well, what would I tell my best friend if they were saying to me, I'm doing this, and the other, I'm thinking of X, Y, and Z, I'm putting everybody else first. If my best friend came to me and said that to me, I'd say, you can't serve those people if you're not at your best. And so for me, it is important to have that designated downtime and off time. I do find that challenging, I have to say, because I love what I do. And I would throw myself into my work and work all hours if I could. But I've lived through burnout. I've lived through that. And it's not a nice place to be. And it can be hard to get out of. And so, again, I've learned that I need to make myself a priority in order to be able to serve the people that I want to the best of my ability. So I try and keep that at the forefront of my mind, that if I want to be the best, then I have to, if I want to give the best, to my clients and my family, then I have to be the best version of myself. And that includes self-care.
May I ask you a question? As a younger professional person, did you struggle to say no to people assertively? And if you did, how have you improved in that area?
That's a really good question. Have I ever struggled to say no? Yes, I think people do struggle to say no. I think physically the words no are very difficult. What I am very good at and have got better through the years is buying myself time. Because sometimes what is a knee-jerk yes or a knee-jerk no indeed isn't the right decision either way. So I'm very good at saying, let me get back to you. Let me check that and I'll come back to you. And doing that just buys me, whether it's 2 hours, sometimes I'll say I'll come back to you by the end of the day. I'll come back to you by the end of the week. Just to give myself that little bit of breathing space to make the decisions. Because as I say, it's very easy to make a knee-jerk sort of decision and say yes and overload yourself, or say no to something that actually would be really good for you. So I think buying myself time is something that I've always done, but I've definitely got better at as I've got older.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer. Always just buy time and take a step back and think through the situation, because the worst thing you can say is no to a very good opportunity or yes to something that's not for you.
Absolutely.
The big thing on LinkedIn and Facebook recently has been people talking about doing journals. Mm-hmm. Do you keep a journal, may I ask?
I don't. I'm going to go back to journaling because I do find it very cathartic and I do enjoy the experience. And again, if you're committing to something like that, then it means that you've got that time aside just to, sort of throw your ideas down, offload, albeit in writing. And I do think journaling is very powerful. I had a phase of, I don't know if your listeners have heard of the morning miracle morning. And that's a fantastic practice to get into. And I used to do that. I did that for about 12 months. And it was really interesting because when I'd done that and journaling as part of that process, my partner would come home and he's super skeptical. And he would say, you've done it this morning, haven't you? He could tell in my energy, my attitude, I'd actually taken that time. So yeah, I think it is definitely something I'm going to go back to.
You founded a charity, More Than a Face. what achievement have you got from founding that charity, and what has it meant to you from an emotional sense as a person?
I think delivering the workshops and the assemblies that I do as part of my charity are without doubt certainly one of the top three most rewarding things that I do in my life, for a whole host of reasons. One, because my son, who is autistic, was also born with a rare craniofacial condition called golden hair syndrome, which means that he was born with only half a face. And I was a perfectionist back then, so it crippled me emotionally to have a baby that was anything but what I saw to be perfect. And so I've been on my own journey in terms of what that means for me as a person, for me as a mother, for my family. And so to now be in a position where I can stand and talk to over 5,000 pupils I've worked with now, and proudly share my journey and be super proud of my sons and what they, who they are and what they're achieving, it's a full 360 for me. And it's really rewarding to introduce my son via the power of YouTube to people who would initially see him looking very different and think they've got nothing in common with him, to then have them leave at the end of the day and know all the things about my son and really see him for the person he is and not just the face that he's got. And I get inundated with messages from parents saying, my child's come home from school and normally they won't tell me what they've done. They say they've done nothing with their day, and we've watched your vlogs. They've told me all about Harry and about his syndrome, and they've remembered things that I'm totally stunned with, and you've really touched my child. And that for me is incredibly rewarding.
Thank you. How can the audience reach you? Sorry, stop there for a second.
Yep.
Just come back to my mind there. You mentioned the word perfectionism, and that you were a perfectionist before your twin sons were born. How do you cope nowadays with accepting a little less than perfectionist ideas?
Do you know what? Now it's a driver for me. So there's a phrase that I read in some of my research and my training, and it was a question that said, are you striving perfection, or are you striving for excellence, or are you demanding perfection? And so that distinction is something that I keep quite clear, although clearly I can't articulate it, but it's something that I remember and think about, because demanding perfection, perfection doesn't exist, and demanding that puts so much pressure on us that we end up in analysis paralysis and we do nothing with our lives. And so I need to be moving forward in my journey, and part of that is the striving for excellence, and learning from mistakes and embracing failing, embracing what that teaches me in a way that success never could. So I would say I'm very different now. Don't get me wrong, I like doing things well, but I don't insist that they're perfect. Done is better than perfect. So I'm much better at that these days.
And looking back at your career as a teacher, from my own childhood, I found that a lot of teachers were happy-go-lucky. Or how did being a perfectionist impact you as a teacher with in terms of engaging with your classes?
Well, ironically, although I am quite the perfectionist, I'm also huge on being your authentic self. So although I was primary school trained, and I work in a high school now, and there have been times when Harry's school have rang me to say that he's attacked a member of staff, that he's in agony and they've had to call an ambulance. There's been, some real dramatic moments, and I've burst into tears in front of 25, 14-year-olds. And they have been incredible. Those sort of moments teach them empathy, compassion, understanding in a way that a lesson never would. And so I'm very big on being real. If I've not slept very well with Harry in the night, because he can be up through the night, I can go into my class and say, I am tired and I am ratty. I am letting you know. And they respect that, and so to me, lots of teachers expect respect as a given. And I think it's earned. I think it works both ways. And so, although I like things to be done right and I like things to be done well, and the education of my pupils is absolutely paramount, and I don't let them down, making sure that they get the best from me is incredibly important to me. I also think it's important that they see that you don't always have to get things right. And so I hope that I'm a role model that inspires them to be themselves and be the best versions of themselves.
What does the future hold for Charlie Beswick as a mindset management coach?
Oh, okay, exciting question. So for me, I am hoping to transition out of education. I know I'm going to find that difficult with the whole identity issue around being a teacher for so long, and really embrace the coaching and the training side of my life. And I'm looking to offer retreats and conferences so that I can really tap into helping people be their best so that they can then give their best to others. That's, it's one of my mantras. And so that's where I'm heading in the next 12 to 18 months, is very much around helping people to become the best versions of themselves.
Have you anything else you'd like to say to the audience? How can the audience reach you? And do you have a gift for the audience?
Absolutely. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they can drop me an email at info@charliebeswick.com. And my gift to your listeners is my ebook, 5 Ways to Manage Your Own Anxiety. So I'm a big believer in managing, not stopping or curing. Anxiety is something that people need to live with, particularly around times of transition and change. So if they'd like to get in touch with me, I'd be happy to email that out to them as my free gift.